Very well, guys. So now we're going to continue with the tertiary shapes, and by tertiary shapes I mean all of this like cuts, the small like rock detail that we mentioned before. So all of those little elements. So let's start with this one, for instance. We got the first rock, which is this one right here, and then we've got the second rock that has a very big cut right there. So I'm going to start with my draw brush. As you can see, I'm just going to start like creating the little hole right there, and then what I can do is I can also go with my clay strips to make this really small, and then just like continue the crack a little bit more so that we get a very nice effect. We can then blend things a little bit, especially here on the border. I don't want to have like round borders. So as you can see, I'm creating a new border a little bit with my clay tubes to give this sort of like effect. So that will be like my first detail on the weapon. Then the next one is on this big rock right here. This one we have another sort of like big crack. So again, I'm gonna go with my draw sharp, and I'm gonna start creating that big crack right there. There we go. Again, we're gonna go to the clay strips, and we're just gonna give this a little bit more visual interest, as I like to say. I'm gonna use my my scrape brush right here to solidify a little bit of those edges right there and get a nicer detail. There we go. That looks really good. Let's see, where else do we have? We got a couple more right here. 1, 2, and 3. So on this one, it's pretty much the same rock. As you can see, we're gonna have with the clay strips, with the draw sharp, we're gonna have another like big nick right there. Again, no need to go like super precise, because this is just one part of the whole of the whole project, and if we spend too much time on this, then we might not spend a lot of time on other parts that might be a little bit more important. However, in the production pipeline, this is one of the things that I always tell my students with these tutorials. When I'm recording tutorials, I always try to make them efficient, right? So I don't want to waste any time explaining things that are very repetitive or things like that. So the only thing is, I don't want you guys to get the idea that this is the rhythm at which you will be working on a production pipeline. So a weapon like this, for instance, is probably going to be a whole week of work for you. Like the high poly, the low poly, and then the texturing and all that stuff. It's probably going to be like 40 hours of work. So don't rush things. I see a very common trend right now where people try to do things very fast in the 3D world. And even though it's always good to be efficient, one thing is to be efficient, and another thing is to be inaccurate, right? So don't sacrifice accuracy for efficiency. There we go. So that's the crack right there. There's a very small crack right here. I'm just gonna like fairly indicate it, and then there's a big chunk missing on this one right here. For that one, I think I'm gonna do clay strips. So with clay strips, I'm just gonna create that sort of like triangular looking shape right there. Let's smooth it out. Let's make it really small so we can like really create the shape that we're looking for right there. There we go. So now we need to talk about alphas. Alphas are a great tool that we have in the 3D world that we can use to generate a lot of different effects. Now, there is a whole process on how to create alphas, but I figured that if I were to explain the whole like process, this tutorial would be like 20 hours long. So we're probably going to be saving that for another time. But I am going to be giving you some alphas that we can use, and I'm going to explain in just a second how we can use those alphas to add a lot more texture and a lot more, a more interesting look here to our element. So yeah, let's go. So alphas are black and white images that we can use to displace certain parts of our geometries, and they're really good to add like this tertiary detail to our elements. Again, it's like the frosting on a cake. So it's a really good way to save ourselves a lot of time, but we need to be very mindful on how and where to use the alphas properly. There's a lot of packs that you can buy. For instance, this guy right here sending 100 rock alphas for you to use. If you want to invest on an alpha pack, that's great. There's also a lot of like alphas free out there, but be very careful. This is a very common mistake. People would see images like this black and white image, and they will be like, oh, that's a great alpha, I'm gonna use it. This is not an alpha. This is just a black and white image. Alphas, good alphas at least, should look a little bit more like this. These are called height maps, and a height map will save in the image or in the information a a specific sort of texture that tells you which vertices are closer to the image and which vertices or pixels are farther away from the image. So this is actually what we want. And some of them, as you can see, they're free. You can download them, like for instance this one right here, and they're fairly easy to use. Let's say we want to use this one. I'm just gonna right click this and I'm gonna save my image. Remember, anytime we're going to be saving an image, the idea or the ideal thing is to save it on a place where we're going to be using it. So in this case, in our project, we're going to go to source images. I'm going to call this rock alpha. This is going to be available for you on the files as well, in case you want to use it. And I'm going to be doing a couple more for you in just a second. So the way we're going to be using an alpha is fairly simple. We're going to go to the draw brush and we're going to change a couple of elements up here. First of all, on the texture side of things, we need to import a texture. Got it? So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna create. Well, sorry about that. My dogs go crazy whenever they see the mailman. So as I was mentioning, we're gonna create a new texture. This is the new texture. We're gonna call this alpha. And now, if we go here to the textures options, you're gonna see that we can load an alpha to, or a texture to this precise alpha. So I'm gonna open, and if we go to our element right here, and we go to our project and source images, we can load that rock alpha. There we go. So the rock alpha is right there. Now, as you can see, this thing is not, or it's doing a weird like sort of tile right there. And that's because on the stroke, we have, or rather on the texture, we need to change the tile option to just a stencil. Sorry, it's not a stencil, view plane. Is it view plane? I'm pretty sure it's view plane. There we go. So on the stroke, we're going to change the stroke to this one called a drag dot or to this anchored option. And when we do that and we drag, look at that. We're dragging the texture into the element, okay? So by doing that, we're adding a lot of extra texture to the rocks, to the primary forms of our rock, without actually having to sculpt all of that detail. So that's the main thing, or the great advantage of using alpha, is that we can add all of this detail very quickly. However, as you can see there, the alpha is very aggressive, so it will not only add the detail, it's actually pushing the surface. How can we like minimize this? By reducing the strength, of course. So if we bring the strength down to, let's say, 0.19, as you can see, we're going to be able to drag this across the surface, add the detail to the rock, which is going to make every single part of the element a little bit more interesting. But at the same time, save ourselves the issue of having to displace the geometry a lot. My advice when using alphas is to rotate them a little bit. You don't want to like be stamping the same alpha in every single part. And of course, if you're gonna get an alpha, try to get an alpha that's close to what you want for your current project. You don't want to have any weird alphas. Here we do have the let's call it the disadvantage that since we're doing this in a sort of symmetric way, all of the alphas are going to look very similar on both sides, as you can see right there. But look at how much texture we can get on this. Alphas are pretty much like used for that. We want to have textures on our element, and it's going to allow us to have a very nice look here on the rock. Now that we have this, because we're still not done. If you thought we were done, you are wrong. There's still a lot of things that we can do. Now that we have this, and we're at a really good amount of resolution, now it's time to start adjusting the silhouette a little bit. So for instance, I'm gonna go to the grab brush. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger, and I'm gonna push this so that we get a more straight silhouette here on this particular rock. I actually don't like that, so I'm gonna go to the scrape option, and I'm gonna scrape this so we get a way flatter effect. Even if later on I need to create the alphas on top of this, I prefer to do that rather than to stay or keep a very ugly or very organic rock in this case. If you wanted to, however, I'm not gonna do it, but if you wanted to, you could break symmetry. We could definitely break symmetry and start working asymmetrically. However, if we do that, one of the things that I wanted to show you later on about proper optimization, which is doing just half of the object, will be a little bit more difficult to follow. Now, if we take a look at the rocks, you're going to see that even though we've added a very nice detail, we can still add more things. So I'm going to go draw sharp. I'm going to make this very small, pretty much like a laser thing. And what I'm going to do is these little lines that we see right there, that's the kind of stuff that we can start adding now. So for instance, we can start adding some interesting details. And this is the thing about detailing and tertiary forms. A lot of people think that alphas will solve everything. Is this the right one? Actually, I think this is the wrong one. It's the one on top. Whoop. A lot of people think that alphas will solve everything, and that once you use alphas, you don't have to do any sort of like hand sculpting. But the thing is, and there's this famous quote that the devil's on the details, right? So if you spend the time to really go in there and add this sort of details, like the one I'm adding right there, that's the kind of stuff that people are going to be looking at when they look at your project and be like, damn, that dude really went in there and did all of this like amazing tricks or amazing lines and stuff. So don't be scared to spend again as much time as you need. Another thing that happens frequently when I'm recording these tutorials is that I would either do some test runs before doing this, or I've done this so many times that it becomes, I wouldn't say second nature, but it's something that I've used or I've done quite a bit, right? So since I've done this a lot, then I can move a little bit faster. And people think that they should be moving at my speed. Don't worry, my friends. When I first started doing this over 12 years ago, I was so slow. I was actually one of the slowest students back then. But perseverance, patience, understanding the tools, that's what's gonna get you into this level. So as you can see here, I'm just taking my time adding details that I might not even see on the concept anymore, but that I just know that are gonna look very, very good. Again, one of the important things is be a little bit more aggressive with the separation of the rocks, because later on we're gonna be using something called an ambient occlusion map, and the more like separation we're able to capture on the model, the more intense and precise that ambient occlusion map is going to be. And that's really, really, really good for us because we get some very, very nice shadows, very, very nice effects. So let's keep going here. It's a couple of lines and layers. As you can see, this is making the whole like stone look a lot more layered. Not bad, right? Not bad for what? What have we been doing this for? Like 3 or 4 hours? Probably a little bit less, right? I think it's probably like 3 hours. There we go. Yeah, and that's pretty much it, my friends. So at this point, you can spend or you can invest as much time or as little time as you want. Like if you want to keep adding different kinds of alphas, different kinds of details, this is the moment to do it. One of the things that I'm gonna do, as you can see, the border right here is very obvious that it's just a round border. So I'm just gonna use my clay tubes to kind of like follow the graphic shape of this thing and modify the elements of the object. There we go. Oh, actually that's not the one that I want. I want scrape brush. There we go. As you can see, that interaction there looks a lot better. And there we go. We got our volcanic handle ready. Look at that. Whew. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I'm sure you guys are going to be able to do something very, very similar for yourself. So make sure to spend, again, as much time as you need on this step. The more you practice on this, the easier the volcano and everything else is going to be. And we're actually going to be going through the sculpting process for a lot of the different pieces here on our scene. So I'm going to go File, let's save as, and let's keep this a plus, so that we can save another version of this element. And we're good. We're ready to go and move on to the next stage. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one.